You are listening to Business Logic, a show for developers to gain tactical, practical, career, and business advice. I'm your host, Andy Chin.
If you're going to get a group of people together and you're going to pay them, my understanding is time is finite. I'm not betting that there's multiple lives. If there are, I hope they're all good. But the current one is finite. And if you're going to ask people to exchange their time on the planet to do things at work, then you need to be paying them well, which means the money has to come from someplace. And the only place it can come from in the long term is customers' willingness to pay.
That was my guest for this episode, Jeff Weinstein. Jeff is currently the product lead for payments infrastructure at Stripe, the company that I happen to work at too. Before Stripe, Jeff founded his own company, Wagon, which was acquired by Box. The reason I wanted to talk with Jeff is that he is one of the most passionate and empathetic people that I know of. You may not have heard of Jeff, which is the reason that I decided to spend a few minutes in the beginning talking about his origin story. But I think you'll find that he's extracted a lot of interesting lessons from his career so far. This conversation was interesting because it's not like the previous episodes in that we didn't go super deep on one topic. Rather, we talked about a bunch of things. Namely, things like what it means to make a rational career choice, how to think about ownership of a product that you did not create, but whose problems you have inherited. And lastly, we talked about why software engineers should not diminish the efforts of marketing teams. So there's a lot to uncover here, and I hope you enjoy it. This is my conversation with Jeff Weinstein. Jeff Weinstein, welcome to Business Logic.
Hello. People cannot see how official this is. There's all kinds of cords and buttons and a laptop and headphones and a microphone. 2 microphones. It's quite a thing.
Yeah, I hope people who have listened to the show understand how seriously I take good audio quality. Hopefully it comes through in previous episodes. But yeah, Jeff is right. There's a lot of wires everywhere. Just curious, how many episodes of Business Logic have you listened to?
I had not been aware of Business Logic until being asked by you to be on it, which I first thought was a prank, but turns out is a real thing. I will now go back and listen to all the ones but my own.
That is a perfectly fine response. There are only 2, by the way, before you. So it's not like this is an interesting.
How high has the bar been set?
There have been really good shows.
Darn.
I mean, that's not to say this won't be awesome as well. But I mean, we've had 2 people, Cortland Allen and Aileen Lerner, both of which have like great things to say. So highly recommend listening to the previous shows if this is your first one. But let's talk about you, Jeff.
Oh, Lord.
I think usually this show is about getting deep into tactics. And especially for engineers, it's usually this exploration of tactics that you can apply in your day-to-day to become better at your work. I think that you have plenty to say about that, Jeff. And to start us off, I think we could educate the audience about who you are as a person and how you got to where you are. So could you give us the Jeff Weinstein origin story?
I try to rarely do that, but because everyone has his or her own little stories, and I like mostly hearing about them. But just to give you a little context on the things I've cared about and sort of how I got there, I guess I just started by liking math, but not being very good at it. Then I actually really liked writing and sort of English literature kind of thing, but I was also quite not good at it. And I tested both of those by studying English literature and then math in college and then not being good at either. And then adding the engineering school halfway through college and sort of having to catch up very quickly in the computer science program. And always just like liking math and liking writing, but then just getting back to the thing I enjoyed doing in high school, which is just typing and making little computer things. So went to school for that. That's where I really learned that I'm not as good at computer engineering as the peers around me, but I always found myself enjoying working on the computer science projects, hanging out in the lab, making my friends there, just a crew to make cool stuff. And so that's how I sort of got started with computers for real, but also very clearly not the best at them.
Do you remember the first program you ever wrote?
I think it was a TI-83 program that, given any date in the past, would generate which calendar day it was.
Nice.
And then we had a bunch of kind of like dumb text, choose your own adventure style games on the TI-83.
Awesome. Yeah.
TI-83, by the way, for those who are youngins, is a calculator that had all kinds of buttons and no touchscreen.
I very much remember the TI-83. It was great to play games on it and make it seem like you were doing real work in class. But yeah, that's one I've heard before. That is people who started writing programs for fun, just like silly games, and then eventually it became a passion for them.
I think the big thing that I also picked up in school there was that doing the thing you are not good at is the thing to do, right? Like I took a bunch of math classes that were well over my capability. I went to a very hippy-dippy K through 12 school in Baltimore, Maryland that did not have standardized tests in any kind of way. And so when I got to University of Pennsylvania, which is like a fairly standardized education, type Ivy League type of school, everyone had it seemed like many people had been trained to be prepared for the tests. And I was like not trained to be prepared for the test. I was trained to just sort of do my hardest work, enjoy the subject matter, and then sort of whenever they want to give us a test, they're welcome to give us a test. Whatever grade I get on it, I will like try to learn from, but it's not my goal to like have a high score on the test just for funsy. Very frequently, I would do poorly on the tests, and then the professor would say very reasonably like, hey, I think you should like bump down a level to the previous semester's pace or whatever it is. And I was like, I actually know all that stuff already. That's like why I'm in this class. Like I want to be in the class that I am potentially the worst at. And so my GPA like definitely proves my strategy there. Actually, I was interviewing at Google for an internship, or maybe I received an offer from Google that I didn't take. It's a different story. A few years later, and they basically just asked like, hey, you seem like a reasonable person. Like you have one of the lowest GPAs of anyone we would have hired for this role. Like, please explain yourself. And I gave them that story, and they're like, that story checks out. That's very reasonable.
So it sounds like there's a theme of trying things that are very much hard and just kind of being hard on yourself, like not doing the thing that looks the best on paper.
Yeah, I think my V2 of that would be to put yourself in a situation of doing the thing that you like a lot and you're challenged. And if it is hard, that's sort of a feeling you can have about it. Or if you're sort of not doing well at it, that is an opinion from an outside party about how you're performing. You get to make your own decision if like that hard or that you're not doing well is actually like good information about, okay, yes, I'm like actually on the path where I'm gaining the most. Now, like at any given moment as like a 20-year-old, did I have that like wherewithal to think that's how I should evaluate the problem? No, I was like, I like this class. I like the subject matter. I'm putting my best foot forward. And yes, I happen to be getting worse grades than the kids sitting next to me, but I'm not going to like drop down to the next thing just to be, quote, good on paper at the thing that they're doing.
So how did that work out for you after college? What did you do next?
So roughly what happened was I did the thing that a lot of students did in 2008 and 2009, which was do one internship on Wall Street, because on the East Coast, that's where a lot of the jobs were. They hired folks who were relatively good at math and such to take Wall Street jobs. So I did an internship there, and then I did an internship building software at Microsoft on Excel, which like for me was like playing for your favorite team, right? That was like, wow, like you get to, I get to work on Excel. Like, I mean, literally cannot think of anything better than that. I still really can't think of anything better. And I drastically did not enjoy the culture of the sort of Wall Street. You had to dress up in a suit and it was hot out, and, I was doing programming work there, but like I didn't understand why I had to be in the suit, and we were in a junkier building than the traders across the street, and just like everything would sort of seem like I am not in the main thing at this company. And whereas at Microsoft, it's like, they're like rolling out the red carpet, and there is literally a Ferris wheel that they brought in to the interns that you could like be on this Ferris wheel for the interns. Like they brought a Ferris wheel into the like onto campus one day. And so I was like, wow, like listen, be doing like the main thing at the company, right? Like as people are thinking about career options, like if you're going to do tech, like do it at a tech company. Like if you're going to do finance, like do finance at a finance company. Be in the heart of whatever it is you're doing. If you find yourself slightly in the annex of whatever activity is happening, it's just, you're not going to see all the opportunities. You're not going to hear about all the hardest problems. You're not going to be working with the best colleagues, no matter what you're doing. Like just really try to put yourself into like the molten center of it.
So I think you said something there that I definitely have never heard before, which is that Excel is the best thing you could possibly imagine working on.
Yes.
And not too many people get that excited about Excel. I'm curious, where does that come from for you?
I was like just very fastidious at tracking things as a kid. Like I think I can pull up on Dropbox right now, like every a text file of every Scrabble game I played against my brother. And he's a younger brother, but he's like one of those younger brothers that's like, he was, as tall. He can tan. For those who I'm quite pale. You can't quite see, but even if you could see me, I'm almost as translucent as the podcast is. And, so he was like good at sports. He was good at running around. And we would play 2-on-2 basketball against our neighbors. And I would put a video camera, VHS video camera on top of the roof to record the 2-on-2 basketball games, and then go back and like tally all the passes and assists and shots and like how far away they were, and put that into like an Excel tracking system so that I could prove I was better at basketball through efficiency measures and, assists and such like this. And so if you are if you're not obviously the best by the traditional ranks of like most points scored, then you can, you must then find another way to win. And so mine was through painstaking ratio efficiency tracking. And so I just like generally like this kind of stuff. I don't know where exactly that comes from. And then like Excel is an infinite scratch space of structured data that you can program any which way you'd like, and brings that kind of tooling to annoying older brothers in high school, and so it was a perfect match. And that also actually turns out to be like a skill later, which is that anytime you're bringing structure or some structured data to a previously unstructured kind of chaotic problem, like some value is being created. I mean, you could think of that as like Google is bringing some structure to the fact that all the websites are unstructured, and Splunk is basically just like structured search over unstructured logs, and you can kind of just like squint, and like many problems look like that. I'm not saying that as what I was thinking through as a kid, but I can definitely recognize when a problem will fit into rows and columns.
So this was the first job out of college, which was...
That was an internship. So what happened there was, this is just as fun as reading my LinkedIn. Let's see. So I honestly had a really like dream gig. Microsoft treats people very well that summer. Seattle is like great during the months of the internship. Seattle's good in general, but is like quite beautiful and warm and such when they have the interns there. And they pay you very well. It's just like, it looks like a great job coming out of school. And it is. And I probably would have done so. But my girlfriend at the time and now wife, who I've known for like 13 plus years now, she got into law school in Washington, D.C., rather than Washington State or whatever. It would have been near Seattle. And so I made like a flip a life coin kind of thing and just kind of followed her to Washington, D.C. and decided not to accept the return offered at Microsoft. So then I was left with find a job in D.C. as my next to do. And roughly what happened there was I sorted the companies in D.C. I filtered them by technology, whatever that word meant in 2009 in D.C., which is not much. And then I just filtered out like things about war, and just like removed CIA, FBI stuff or defense contractors, which is just like wasn't my personal interest. And then, looked at like the highest, like the largest revenue market cap company, and that was ComScore, which is an internet market research company in Virginia, and applied to get a job there. And that was kind of a funny story because this was like pretty late in the game. They had already done their on-campus recruiting. They had already filled their analyst class. They had a whole structure to this, and I was outside the window by which that would be easy, even though they do go to our campus. And so I had to just email enough people there to get them to open my resume. And I kind of had to send them a note being like, listen, like, I know I'm outside the bounds of the time frame, but like, I actually think I could be quite useful at the company, even though I'm, a new grad, but like, I think I could be good at stuff. And so I just wormed my way into the company roughly. And that's how I got myself at ComScore.
What did you say besides I can be good at stuff to sway them over?
My guess is I didn't say much more than that. Like I probably said something very close to that. I've learned to practice very structured cold emails. And so I probably wrote something like, hey, the situation is that I'm living in DC for X, Y, and Z reasons. My interests are 1, 2, and 3. I looked at the role, like here are the attributes I think apply to it. And what I'd love is to meet someone at meet the recruiter or a hiring manager these 3 days between these times. And I'm happy to come to the office, and just like sort of relentlessly be specific, almost assuming it's going to work, like have this attitude in it, which is almost like they missed an email that you previously sent that they agreed to. Is like, hey, like almost like as we agreed, like I'll be coming into the office. Not quite like that, but rather than, hi, I am, writing to you in order to offer my half interest in a position I'm not sure of. I was like, I want to do exactly the following things. Here are the skill sets that I think I could bring to the table. I need a job anyway. Like, hello.
Sounded like being thoughtful and straightforward really paid off in that situation.
Yes, though in retrospect, that company has had all kinds of problems, which was also an interesting thing to learn along the way. They were later like delisted from the stock market, and there was quite a bit of fraud at sort of at least the executive level. I don't know if exactly what happened there, but one in a series of companies to work at for sure.
So I want to fast forward just a bit and go to the present day. Where do you work again?
I work at the Stripe Corporation, Stripe Inc.
Stripe Corporation.
We're in their quite nice office here in San Francisco.
So, I mean, I haven't really acknowledged this on the show, but I also work at Stripe. And so I know Jeff from that. I just want to dig in because I think you've had a lot of great thoughts on this career picking topic. You've mentioned that Stripe is the first rational career choice that you've ever made. What did you mean by that?
I have generally picked what to work on by building something I needed as the next step. Like, I seem to be writing a lot of SQL queries or like a lot of MapReduce queries, and I'm always curious about the distribution of the values in every column, and if there are outliers in the data set, or even if all the numbers in the data set are even, right? Just like if all the numbers in your data set are even, like what is the likelihood that you didn't multiply by 2 along the way or something? So basically like applied pet peeves of data became like a little Python script that would check those things roughly. And I'm fortunate to like have made friends through startup life and other projects in which it's not just me in a corner writing this stuff. Like I have a bunch of pals, many of whom now do work at Stripe, who we would sit around and think, hey, this would be really fun to work on. Like we need this in our lives. Let's build something like this. That's how I got started on a couple kinds of projects. And in the last sort of round of what to work on, I feel like I had not properly thought through the what to work on part. I had basically been like, what is sort of nearby that I am passionate about? And if I can gain enough momentum through a small group of people, either people using the tool I made or just talking to people about if it's nifty or not, or getting people to wake up an hour earlier or work with me on it on a Saturday, those signals had been the things that had ignited just the next step. And I've done that a few times, and I think we made a lot of great software. We built a lot of great product. We made some good community around the things we've built. And we've even been able to, a small group of us have been able to sell a company or two through what we've built, but in no particular outcome that was meaningful to a group of people sort of wider than us. Like it didn't have the impact on just our audience the way we wanted it to. And I don't think that was because of our lack of execution or building great software or being good product builders. I think it was really about picking the wrong problem. And so in this last round of, do we start another company, or what should we do with our time? I was like, well, why don't we write down a list of places in which we think have hard problems, but are actually working on sort of problems that matter, and use that as the cow catcher filtering mechanism of finding something great to work on, rather than like having to come up with it yourself. I feel like there's a lot of, you must run the company, you must build the startup, I have to go find a great idea. I surely don't need to be the top person or the founder CEO in order to feel impactful. And so that's had been a very important change in how I evaluated what to do next.
That's really interesting, because the first approach that you mentioned sounds like what almost every graduation commencement speaker says. They say like, follow your passion, whatever you're interested in, solve your own problems, and that's the path to success. But it sounded like what you're saying is that you kind of had a switch where that's what you used to think, but now you're sort of approaching it from a question of not so much what I'm good at, but what the world needs.
In either case, you have to mitigate the downside of that approach. And if you don't mitigate it, it could be potentially sort of business fatal, hopefully not actual fatal. So in this case, if you were building something sort of out of your blinding passion for a problem you see that, and I've done that before, then the thing you need to mitigate is, does the world actually need this? Right? Like, you found something, there is some light. You're following some heat of a thing being potentially useful. And it is very difficult to distinguish whether or not it is your blind passion to stoke the embers and generate that heat and bring a thing to market. And maybe there's some activation, crazy energy you need to sort of make a thing that doesn't exist. And then people will be very excited that it exists and sort of self-adopt for it. But the counter is that you might be very wrong, right? You might just be putting all your energy into something that the world does not need. And so you need to very explicitly, under that strategy, hypothesis test in a ruthlessly rational, unopinionated, external perspective view. Is the thing that I'm building actually useful? So, for example, I remember a time at Wagon in which Wagon was basically a fancy SQL editor that a lot of people liked. So you could type SQL, you could do lots of graphs and sharing, and had a kind of Google Docs thing. It's almost like Figma for SQL or something in today's parlance. And we would have a couple hundred or 1,000 concurrent query writers typing real code into the SQL app.
To be sure, Wagon is the company that you built.
Correct. Yes. Well, Wagon is a company I founded with some pals a few years ago, thanks to the good context setting. And, we were a few months in and people were really using this thing, and graphs were like lightly up and to the right. I mean, nothing was like massively taking off, but it wasn't like we were building something, not shipping code, and no one was using it. We were building, shipping every few days, high iteration speed, lots of Twitter love, lots of community love, people using the product. Like, everything feels like it's going sort of the right way. A thing you've piled your energy to is being used by others. This is make things people want style stuff. And then I remember the day that like our app was down, right? And so there was a bug. We made some bad deploy. We basically bricked the app and however we deployed it. And a couple people were like a little bit miffed, a little upset, like a little bit. We got a couple bad tweets. I got like a couple emails. And then like, whatever it was, 20 or 30 minutes later, we got the app back up. And then, a couple hundred people just kept typing and like the thing worked. And I kind of patted our team on the back like, like it was broken. We fixed it. Like, great. I missed the huge lesson here, which is that people weren't that pissed off that our thing was down. I mean, they weren't massively upset. There wasn't a riot of people furious and throwing pebbles at our San Francisco, Valencia, above the janitorial supply company, tiny overheated office space. Like, there was no lightning strike of even small tens of people like shaking their fist at us. And that was the missed signal. And so when I tell buddies who are like in the let's build something in your passion style approach, I'm like, you need to take your app down for a day. You should turn your thing off and see, does the world turn over pitchforks at you? And if it does not turn over pitchforks at you, you probably don't have a real thing. That's probably not what it is. And you should, also charge them lots and lots and lots of money as another way of sort of making them feel more impassioned for the state of your piece. So that is like, I would say, the largest, most powerful way you can kind of double check whether or not, if you're going down the I'm building something I think it should exist in the world way, is put a bounded box around the time and energy you would spend doing that thing. But then you just have to 2 hours a day be your own worst enemy. Like, write down exactly the default dead case of why this thing should not exist and like generate some test to see if that is true. Another strategy I would do if I was going down that particular path is I would pick my most like prototypical customer, the one who I think would pay me the most or be the happiest, like most product market fit, happiest customer. Find that company or that consumer or whatever it is. Let's just imagine it's a B2B thing. Live in their office. Like, go to the company, be like, hi, I'd like to solve the following use case for you. I want you to pay me some way larger amount of money than you could ever imagine saying out loud. Maybe it's, I need you to pay me $100,000 a month or $100,000 a year or whatever is sort of a very large number for your space, and tell them, I will solve it exactly perfect for you. And I'm going to do it from inside your office. And I'm going to do it in 3 months or whatever some reasonable bounded box time is. And at the end, if they let you leave the building, then you have a bad product. Like you don't really actually have fit. You have a person who sort of liked having you around, and maybe your product was a little helpful. And I think you have to just put yourself in situations in which you really are like testing the edge of like actually how product market fitty is this, because seeing sort of what I experienced at Stripe in comparison, and as I found as I changed my search criteria of what to do work to things that have product market fit, but like all big startups have incredibly complicated internal problems and very difficult engineering and product decisions to be made, is when Stripe takes like any hiccup, like the internet lights on fire with people wanting this thing to be back up, and that is a very, very, very good sign.
This reminds me of something that you mentioned on Twitter. I highly recommend following Jeff. I believe you are at Jeff_Weinstein.
True.
The thing that you tweeted was, this is one of your recruiting pitches, but you're basically saying that Stripe would really benefit from a dozen founder-minded people to revamp large sections of Stripe that need ownership. It seems like there's a bit of a tension for these founder-minded folks. Like a lot of them want to run their own thing and feel like that they own what they've built, and that's just slightly harder to do, even if you're at a Stripe which has spectacular product market fit. And as you said, yes, people will riot if Stripe is down for even just a bit. How do you square those two? How do you convince a founder-minded person that they should spend some amount of time at some place that seems like it's already kind of found what the market wants?
Yeah. I think you have to decide which part of the work experience is giving you the most pleasure. Is it you are sort of the name next to the brand, like it is your company? Like I was the CEO of Wagon. I do have a lot of pride in being associated with what we built and the community that we've built. And I probably do feel extra pride, some marginal additional pride that I had been part of making its existence and leading it day to day, like independent of the exact title. There's nothing wrong with that, but that is sort of a short-lived excitement, I think. I think the majority excitement of leading a company is surrounding yourself with great people, working on hard problems quickly and having fast iteration cycle, is building community. It's being able to find others outside the building and bring them into your vision. It's to have massive impact outside of what you could do as just an individual. And it's to build something that you could feel proud of later. Like I think a lot of those attributes are not you being the CEO related. There absolutely are life experiences around being a founder CEO that you cannot mimic elsewhere. So I don't want to confuse that they are equivalent. For example, there's just no way I would have had the experience of pitching VCs or literally figuring out how the wires work when you actually need to collect the money from them, or how to go through acquisition processes, or how to fire people, though you can sort of do that anywhere, roughly. There are a certain class of human capabilities that you can flex in that muscle. But the reason why I think that Stripe, but I don't want to be too Stripe specific here, I think that any company that has more demand than they have capability to produce, like the customers are more demanding than what the company is able to handle by like some very reasonable margin, are places in which like the founder spirit of fast iteration cycle can bust down all walls, can be incredibly specific around what do we need to accomplish in what order to unlock what things, to be able to inject energy into those around you, to take all excuses off the table. Like as a founder, there's no other party you can go to and to explain like why some set of circumstances are too hard, and now you have an excuse why your thing is not going well. Like, well, that's your problem, right? And I think there's no reason why you can't have that spirit inside of a company. Like, yes, some companies' cultures might not encourage that behavior, though I work very hard to make sure our teams and the teams I participate on are encouraging of that kind of autonomy and ownership. I'm definitely not a Steve Jobsy quoting person all day long, but there is a kind of hilarious one where something like becoming like a VP at Apple is basically very, very difficult, or like a director or some level that's like quite difficult. And people are like, well, what is the attribute in which you like get that role? And it was that at this level, there are no excuses. Like at this level, all the problems are yours. You cannot blame any other party for the poor performance of your thing. It is your thing to make good. And that is quite a founder mindset that I adore and I think can be injected at nearly any level of the company. And so even if I look at Stripe, that does have quite a bit of product market fit in many of the things that we get up and do every morning, we're like almost nowhere onto the full mission. And if I think about how many founder-minded, just very focused, very creative, very hardworking people could unlock like the next stage of growth, I really feel like it's kind of surprising to me that more companies don't go out and have like programmatically find founders to do those roles, because I've seen just the massive change in how team can work when it is led by a person like that versus a person who sort of allows for excuses to just be part of their circumstance. I guess in summary, like a founder is sort of removing excuses from the bag of things you can say about why things didn't go well. All problems are yours again.
It reminds me of one talk I saw, and I can include this in the show notes, but there's something about how the default case is to have kind of a victim mindset, which is to say, I'm late to this meeting because traffic was really bad, as opposed to I'm late to this meeting because I didn't leave soon enough, because in order to anticipate the traffic and things like that. It sounds like the way you've described it, that being founder-minded is kind of like an innate quality where people are or they aren't. To what extent do you think this is something that can be learned?
I don't have a good sense if it's innate or not. I really hope it is not innate. I don't think it is innate. If it is innate, then we should invent how to make it uninnate. Like it's so useful to have the ownership-minded, we're going to make this successful, and we're going to like just discreetly break down our problems into ways that we can solve them collectively and sort of not wait. Like maybe not everything has to be done today, but there's sort of, because you're used to the dollars ticking on the wall as your clock as a founder, you know that there just is finite energy you can put into things. Forget the money. At some point, you'll just have to tell the other engineers and other people on your team, like, if it's gone on too long and there's not enough success, they'll just find a better job, right? Like there were moments at Wagon where I was like, well, what actually is the reason why anyone is coming into work today, right? It's not because of their amazing salary. It's not because of their like massive expected value of their shares. It's not because like they have a court order to do so. They've honestly, every single morning, the people on the team self-selected to get out of bed and go into the same place or remote or wherever they were to work on this problem. And it's because it scratched some itch for them about how they can progress their career and learn something and be part of something fun and rewarding. And those are the attributes I think that you can adjust in a founder mindset to like make exist. And I don't think you have to do that just at a startup. I think you could do that within a larger company. I mean, even Patrick, the CEO of Stripe, he said what I thought at the time was a weird thing to me, and turns out he only says weird things to everyone, was that he said something like, none of these problems were your creation here. Obviously, the company had been going for like 7 or 8 years before I got here. He's like, but they're all your problem now. And while we don't have any expectation for them to all be fixed overnight, it is fully your responsibility with the collective team to solve all of them. And there is no natural budget to how to solve it. Like if you can convince us that the long-term ROI of some way of solving something is net positive in the future, then we should absolutely go and do it. That was a wonderful thing to have told me, because it confirmed the thing I hoped, which was that there is no natural cap. There is no natural hierarchy bounding box that I think people associate with being at the big company, whereas you kind of can feel that more as a founder. I think companies can much encourage their teams to have that mindset. And then again, like excuses are off the table because all the tools are available to you.
I want to switch gears just a bit here. At the present, it seems like if you're an engineer and you were at one point in your career, writing code for a living, it seems like there's almost only two paths that you can go down, or at least ones that are obvious. The first is just to become a really excellent individual contributor and become really senior at that. Or you can manage a bunch of individual contributors and be a fabulous engineering manager, and maybe eventually that leads to CTO or something in the future. But it seems like you in your career have jumped around and done a whole bunch of things instead of going down the traditional path. You started a company in Wagon. You're a product lead of payments infrastructure at Stripe, which is like kind of an interesting title in itself that we can go into. But how and why did you decide that the sort of senior product leader path made sense for you? And did you know or have any inkling that that would be a good fit when you were earlier in your career and as a developer?
Yeah, so I should definitely note, and anyone who actually knows me well listening will be like, Jeff is a very bad engineer, and I wouldn't trust him to be a full-time engineer doing anything. And so this is like sort of quite off the table as a rational outcome for him to be paid to do engineering work. But suffice that as it is, I've always just tried to figure out like what is the most blocking constraint at the company that I'm at, and I want to work on that exclusively. I don't know if that quite answers the like be an individual contributor engineer or manage and how to think through that path. But I think that the thing you should have in the back of your mind is, am I working on the blocking constraint of the company's success? And that can ebb and flow. Maybe some years it's doing engineering work on a prototype that might not ever see the light of day, but its expected value, if it works, like will be company altering. Maybe it's that for some period of time, the blocking constraint to the company is that we need to train 100 interns. And so you're going to do the 100 intern training program, and it's mostly an education and coaching exercise. Maybe it's that deployment of your product or service is finicky with your customer base. And so you need to be on airplane on Mondays, come back on Friday nights, going to customer sites and sitting with their teams, just integrating their APIs, SDKs, whatever it is. I think if you just change the maximization function to like, what is my position and role, and then just instead make it, what is the blocking constraint of the company and can I be involved? You will, I feel like by definition, be working on the part of the company that the shareholders, CEO, whoever's sort of in charge they care about the most, right? It feels roughly reasonable. And so from there, you just, at some point, like almost the ladders and the performance reviews and like whatever is the very reasonable merit-based system you have at your larger company, those will just sort of fall in line because every time the group will say, well, she's working on the most important thing we have, like, and it seems to be going better. And some parts of the day will be engineering, some parts of the day will be project management and whatever. So I feel like one, just walk that path forward as hard as you possibly can. And that does take some confidence to sort of get outside your scope. I remember, for example, you can't be obnoxious about it. It's like, can't be like, I refuse to do the thing I've been assigned because I have to work on the most important thing. Nobody likes that person. But I remember the first job I had, I was hired to do this analyst role, which was like write a lot of SQL on tickets that customers had coming in and like literally take a ticket from a customer, write a SQL query and like dump a text file back to it. It's like fairly rote, but important analyst behavior at the company, and happened to learn a lot of stuff along the way, which probably was the cause for Wagon down the line. But after a few months of that, I was like, hey, like, I actually think that we could be making a bunch of money if we sold analysis or reports or whatever it even was that we were doing to like this audience for this reason. I think it was actually like iPhone market share in France because L'Orange had just launched iPhone support and we hadn't quite gotten to covering that yet. And I was just like, hey, can I take some time to just make that new product? Like I'll still do my regular job, but I'll make the PDFs and the data files and I'll talk to the sales team and I'll make the FAQ and I'll have it on the letterhead and, I'll write a little PR brief for it. I mean, how can you really say no to that person? Yes, I'll do 100% of the activities you told me to do. And in my spare-ish time, I'd like to create revenue and value for the company. Like, do I have your permission to do that? If the company says no to that, surefire reason to leave. Just make that your last day and just calmly walk out the door that these folks can't take free value when they see it. And actually was able to like do that. And then we made revenue based on the thing that I had made. And then I hired a bunch of my friends to join me to get it going. And that sort of kicked in like my recruiting tactic for accomplishing things. And again, not strategic. Like nothing I've done here I've mentioned thus far was strategic. It was just walking closer to the fire. And at that point, like you can call me a product manager, you can call me an engineering manager, you can call me babysitter. I refer to myself as overhead when I write down when we write down our head count. It's like, we need like all these engineers and data scientists and marketing people, and like we'll need a couple people in overhead, and that's my self. That's how I refer to it. But I do recognize that management is an important thing.
I love that. I personally think that's great for like there are a lot of things you said in there that were quite inspiring. The first is kind of to know that you have a role, but sort of to not let it limit your thinking, it sounds like, in terms of problem solving. So just because your title says engineer doesn't necessarily mean everything is a software problem and code is the solution. Stepping back a bit, I think that things that you said really appealed to me because when I look around at my peers who are also engineers, on the one hand, I see people who are extremely passionate about writing code. That is like literally all they can. I know someone, for example, at Stripe here who in his free time, instead of watching Netflix, he enjoys playing around with programming languages. And so I told him like, this is absolutely the right career for you. On the flip side, you have also this kind of more business-minded engineer who enjoys writing code. It's a very fascinating intellectual problem, but they also kind of think about the things that you're thinking about. That is like, what is the most valuable thing for the business? It seems like there's a range of engineers there. I'm really happy that you addressed that particular crowd.
I think the good and bad answer is all these things are basically both, right? Like there are your hobbies and interest in computer science is purely good. That doesn't mean you need to feel good or bad about applying that skill set and love for a topic uniformly every day, right? You can still enjoy rebuilding a compiler instead of watching Netflix. Both are great. But again, that's sort of independent from all the tools in the toolkit to accomplish what to do at work. It's like one of the other things that I think is kind of hilarious is that like roughly at the end of the day, from the company's like pure capitalistic survival perspective, the only thing that matters is the customer's willingness to pay. That's actually the only thing that matters from a company perspective. Now, the company can be a fun place to work. It can have nice iced tea. The humans can treat each other well. The customers can like send in stickers about how much they love the thing. Those are all fine, but that also can be applied to a nonprofit or to a family or to, just yourself and your buddies thinking about what to do on a hike. But if you're going to get a group of people together and you're going to pay them for their time, my understanding is time is finite. I'm not betting that there's multiple lives. If there are, I hope they're all good, but the current one is finite. And if you're going to ask people to exchange their time on the planet to do things at work, then you need to be paying them well, which means the money has to come from someplace. And the only place it can come from in the long term is customers' willingness to pay. And so you get into this kind of funny thing where at the same time, prototypically, like stereotypically, engineers will be like, I don't like marketing, or like, I don't respect marketing, or like, I can't believe what the marketing people did, or like the marketing people don't get our thing, all of which might be slightly true, right? But if, I think it's like Robert Nolan is some fancy university scholar kind of person on marketing and roughly has a very cute, easy to read diagram, which is that the customer's willingness to pay is like, let's call it X dollars. And it is the mutually exclusive sum of two things. One is the intrinsic actual value of the product, like the utils that the customer feels and pays money for in the most direct, this is the utility I receive from the product way, plus their perceived willingness to pay, which is a different mutually exclusive other bucket of willingness to pay. And so it's funny that engineers could poop on the marketing strategy for it, whereas like, can you imagine a marketing program that increases the willingness to pay through improving perceived willingness to pay might dwarf the actual intrinsic value. Like, how much extra software would you have to produce in order to generate the willingness to pay that a great marketing campaign could do? We should be, that's an example of where I feel like engineers aren't seeing the whole picture, whereas engineering is just a tactic. And if it matters to you that you are paid to do even your favorite hobby, then please participate in the fullness of the company system that we have. For example, like how much is the actual value of Slack? Slack is definitely a portion of intrinsic value, but there's actually a bunch of perceived value being baked into the price, and their stock shows that both are doing quite well. So that again is just, you have to be able to pull out the tool that you're sort of comparative advantage happiest to participate in, but is not the only tool happening. And you can sort of see your time as more of a spectrum of practicing those different tools, even if there's one particular tool that you know on the weekends would naturally fall back into practicing.
This is great. I mean, that's kind of largely part of the premise of business logic, is recognizing that we're just part of a bigger system. If you work at a company that, again, engineering, I like how you put it, engineering is sort of a tactic toward the thing that matters most, which
and we're all running a puppet show. Like, software is a puppet show, that when the user experiences software, they think that something good is happening, right? It's like, I mean, it's really just like the pixels like flopping around or whatever. It's like there is some perception thing happening here. So even if you believe in the beauty and purity of the engineering work, like, it is still how it is perceived by the user that does matter. You can make a better puppet show. You can make a more maintainable puppet show. You can make a more automated puppet show. You can have your puppet show have better static typing or whatever comes out of the compiler. But at the end of the day, we are just running a puppet show. And the puppet show is, at a company level, evaluated on customers' willingness to pay for the puppet show.
So on this puppet show, I wanted to talk about something that you're quite known for, certainly within Stripe, but also on Twitter, that is having an amazing referral rate to Stripe. I think how many people have you referred?
I don't know.
Right now?
Many dozens.
Many dozens.
Many dozens.
We don't have a referral bonus here at Stripe, but if we did, I feel like
that is, yeah. I'm actually anti-referral bonus, and now I understand how it could be how it could be personally useful. But I'm happy that we do not have a referral bonus, even if it would be actually materially useful to me at the moment.
So certainly for those listening, I'm sure it'd be quite interesting if you happen to work at a company. Actually, regardless, like in general, it feels good to work with awesome people. How do you do it? How do you convince so many people to join? Like, what do you actually say on that sell call?
I guess a little background for a second. I can tell whether or not I am leaning into the thing I'm doing, be it work, planning an event, hosting a little dinner party, working with a charity, reading a book, literally anything. I can sort of I can sense that I am enjoying it if I am telling others about it. That's just a personality kick for me. So there is something about myself that is like, if I am not sort of trying to bring a lot of people together around something, I know that the thing I'm doing is actually not that good for me. Like, I've been in jobs in which I have not been going out and recruiting the best people that I know to work with me, and that is a surefire sign that I need to change something about my work. I've experienced that at least once. Personally, I can't fake that feeling. Like, even if there was a giant referral bonus, I would not be able to go out there and do that for a thing I didn't personally wake up in the morning and think, like, I just want the best people to be a part of this. That sort of has to come first. And then afterwards, like, it's pretty straightforward for me. Like, I'll just tell the candidate, hey, I want you to make a full information decision. I'm not going to convince you to join. I have no interest in convincing you to join. I just want to make sure you have full information about what the experience will be like. And then you can self-select if that experience matches what you want. Why would I do anything else? I could twist your arm into it. That's not going to work. As soon as they join, then they can leave whenever they want. So the arm twisting doesn't work. I could lie to them. Well, that doesn't work either, because they're going to have full information when they do join. So then I'll be mocked and ridiculed for that behavior. And so just like logically, like, I'll just tell you, like, hey, this is the thing that's up. Also, it's a great forcing function, because if you're explaining it and it doesn't sound like a thing you would join, well, then you should either leave or fix it. So again, kind of perfect information way to like cut to the chase of what's important to them. And then just like ask the candidate, like, yo, like, what do you want out of the day? Like, what is it? What are the behaviors that you would like to experience and practice at work? And just hear him out, right? And he or she will hopefully have some sense of it, or maybe they can write it down ahead of time. And I'd be like, listen, like, what I'd love to do is connect you with people at the company who can tell you more about A, B, and C things. Sometimes they don't know what kinds of questions to ask to even explore that kind of thing. And so there are a couple topics about, you want to be in a place of high growth, because if you don't have high growth, meaning the company is growing either by revenue or headcount or some sustainable important thing. I mean, it's easy for people to grow spending money. You can just spend money anytime you want. That's quite easy to do. But is there some sustainable return on investment thing that is just growing? If company doesn't have that, then the problem stays stagnant and there just aren't new things to work on. And so you just won't experience as much. And of course, then, we're all human. So we'll just bicker around splitting up the pie around rather than growing the pie. So you want to be around a place that has growth. You want to be around a place that sort of rewards the right behaviors. So you could just ask people well, what is it that gets claps and cheers inside the company? Is it the person who brings back the largest deal and you don't know how they got it and he or she is the only one that gets clapping? Or is it the intern who fixed our onboarding process and now, some set of horrible mungy things are less horrible and mungy? Is that the kind of thing that gets clapping? What is incentivized to be the idealistic outcome of what you're doing? And you want to make sure that, if they're the thing I want to do, I hope gets the clapping. You can ask about that. The other one I ask is just ask people who have left the company. It's actually very easy to find out. You just go on LinkedIn, you look at companies, where's their previous company, you look for first or second degree connections and just email 10 of them. Hey, I see you used to work at X company. Do you mind if we get on the phone for 5 minutes? Here's my phone number. Call or text me anytime. I promise I'll pick up. And I'd love to hear what's good, bad, and ugly about your experience. I mean, that's basically, again, perfect full information. And I super encourage people to do that. I have a bunch of other tactics as well. But in general, showcase the hard part of the job, right? It's we're hiring you because our stuff is broken, right? We're not hiring you because we're already so successful that we don't need you. Well, we would just enjoy not paying you and we would just enjoy our higher margin. We're paying you because we got some busted stuff and we think we'd like you to own that problem. If you would like to own this big, hairy, nightmarish problem that we have, in exchange, we would like to treat you well. We like to surround you with great people. The lettuce will be very crisp and hopefully the stock value will be massively increasing over time. No promises. Please join. It's a little bit easier at Stripe because they've done such a good job, I think, of building an engineering and just general culture that does self-select people, and that kind of does snowball at some point. But even in my little dinky startups, I just tell the people listen, we're not going to pay you as much money as any other company. We don't have free food. Our office gets too hot and is too cold, is never the right temperature. The floor slopes in a way in which all the chairs would just they would just end up in one corner of the room every night. And then in the morning, we'd have to retrieve all the chairs and put them back in the right place. But what we can offer you is hard, interesting problems. You'll be surrounded by what we think are world-class, hardworking, humble people. And by the way, you should accept this role assuming we will fail. The highest likelihood outcome is that we fail. If I promised you the company is dead in 18 months, do you enthusiastically take the job? If you do, you're going to love this thing. If not, ask some more questions. I'm not going to twist your arm, and I'm not going to tell you it's going to be wildly successful.
That's certainly one of the more counterintuitive bits of advice I've ever heard when it comes to selling people. That is to really be brutally honest when it comes to what is hard and will be hard about working at the company.
Absolutely. And if they don't like it, first of all, great signal that they're not the right person for you. Actually, I'm just looking at yesterday we closed an engineer that I was very sure was not going to join. And I texted him or her. I said, whoa, you joined. This is amazing. And the person writes back, I clicked the things. I assume that was accepting the offer or whatever. Yeah. And I said, that's amazing. This is just today. It's what's the top thought? Anything we can learn from this experience? Why did you click the button? Right? I leave no opportunity unpoked. The person writes, this is verbatim. Experience overall was great. Although I have a lot of back channel connections to Stripe, so that might be a fair comparison. Okay, we have a little bit of unfair advantage there because this person already knew a bunch of good people here. That's great. And so I think the big thing for me was seeing how excited everyone was about the work and potentially me joining, plus a bunch of thinking and talking about how my part was going to be impactful on this team and on this hard project. This person seemed to recognize that there is quite a lot of undone things, and that he or she could place themselves into the work and self-select that is the experience that they wanted to have. And that's basically as good as you can get. I was actually pretty shocked that the person closed, but here we are.
That's awesome. I mean, I feel like there are a lot of notable omissions from that message in their rationale. They didn't talk about how amazing the salary sounded, or the role or title, or how Stripe will, just keep growing and that'll mean a big payday for them sometime in the future. It was exclusively, it sounded like, just about the impact.
Yeah, it's hard to know exactly what goes into all the things, and I'm not saying we should underpay our people on purpose, though we do pay quite well, both in salary and equity, but we don't sort of never heard us win out based on that. And so I think you have to, for any company, not Stripe specific, like you have to select into working there because of something other than just those on paper attributes. There is, of course, some minimum bar of you need to be paid well for your time. I had a professor in college, a material science professor, another class I was terrible at, Dr. Pope, who I keep in touch with. And he told me, you have to be good. You do not need to be cheap. I was like, there it is. And like, that is, you have to remember, like, you are the hardworking person who is exchanging your time for the value of the company. Now, yes, you should share in that value, and it should have hopefully great upside, and you should capture that. But you're an N of one. You need to look out for yourself, and you have to be good. You do not need to be cheap. You should ask for a great market wage and great upside, and be direct about it. Because think about it, you're like, of course, I will just take all my free time and then do your idea and make it great on behalf of the company. Well, that sounds actually wildly odd use of time. Like, well, why are you doing it? Well, I'll learn a bunch of stuff. Cool. But like, also pay me.
That's fantastic. I hope for this hour of your time that it can remain free. But we're at the point right now, which is sort of a tradition on Business Logic, that is the lightning round. So
is there like a noise that gets made?
I unfortunately have not yet found a good sound effect.
Okay,
but maybe in the future.
Go sound effect.
All right. We'll try that out for future episodes. But yeah, I've got a few questions for you. Just answers. Keep it on the shorter end.
Yep.
But just quick ones for you here. The first one is your favorite thing to cook and why.
I like going to the farmer's market, buying a bunch of fresh looking stuff, and then figuring it out later. I like constraints. I don't like recipes, but I like bringing people together through food. And it's just like a creative, things are happening fast. We're going to make something great, kind of similar attitude to building projects. But I cannot sit there and go through a recipe laboriously measuring stuff. I'll just turn the stove on and get cooking.
How do you know what to buy?
I don't know. You watch enough Jacques Pepin on PBS as a kid, who's a great French chef, has just a great outlook on life on public TV. If you need a Saturday afternoon activity, Jacques Pepin, stuff that looks fresh. Ask people, hey, like, what's good? Just walk up to people. Hey, what's good? Ask the folks who are touching the food, what's good? And it is amazing how much people want. I mean, you must be finding this by interviewing people, and I'm doing it right now. How much people want to talk about themselves? Like, just let them out, let them loose. And that's also part of closing candidates. It's just like, I'm listening. They mostly just spill their soul out. If you're empathetically have no agenda, and there's no way to have lower agenda than going to a farmer's market and asking the fish person, like, please tell me about how the fish got here. There cannot be a lower agenda moment.
All right, here's a hot take.
Yep.
Should designers code?
I have no idea. I mean, I generally, I have a great friend who's the design lead at Snowflake, which is a database company, but they have a bunch of UI products now. And I was hanging out with him yesterday morning. Is it Monday? It's Monday. It was yesterday morning. And he was literally asking that same question. He was like, I think designers should code. Like, am I crazy? He was asking me. I was like, I don't know. I just generally think that you want to be as close to the medium of the thing you're producing as possible. And so, do you want to, I'm not saying you should only code, but I think that anytime you are formalizing a barrier between the activity you're doing and how it'll be perceived by the customer or clicked by the customer or tasted by the customer or whatever it is, you're just not close enough to the thing. You're just like not close enough to the actual thing to know if it's like good enough, right? Most products or experiences are either truly terrible, they're not even worth talking about, or they're like, you could tell that this is not like no one who really cared a ton worked on this. Like, yeah, it kind of works, but like there's something about this where it's like there wasn't enough center of gravity mass humans who were just like, this is not good enough. It has to be a little bit better because of A, B, and C. Let's do it. It's hard for me to imagine that group of people choosing to be one layer removed from the medium by which the thing is built. And so I think you could do it, but I think being any layer removed is a risk.
Excluding Silicon Valley, where would you place your bets to be the next Silicon Valley?
I have no idea. Next question.
All right. Sounds good. So the next one is a bit of a sneak preview on the next episode, which will be with Michael Deering, who runs a venture capital firm / education center. So you know Michael Deering very well. You've known him for a while. What is your favorite thing about him?
A bit of context. I'm not sure how well I know Michael. I've enjoyed every interaction I've had with him. My context for knowing him is he was an investor in our company Wagon, and I was introduced to him when I asked some people I knew who were VCs in New York, like, who should I work with as we think about turning this project into a company? Like, you should absolutely talk to Michael. I think I'd get a kick out of him. And so I met him for a weird coffee in Woodside at a diner one afternoon, and we had a nice chat about progressive education and my experience of building the product and service so far, and where I wanted to take it and why it was important to me. And by the time I basically got back to my car, he sent me an email being like, I would love to be able to help you in any possible way in any future world. One way I could help you today is I could give you money. If it's money that you need, I'd be happy to participate. I was like, wow, even the way he phrased that is exactly the kind of people I would love to work with. Is the default thing is, how can I help you bring your strange, probably wrong idea into the world? And I would love to participate in any possible form. Again, founder mentality, to just have this thing walk a few feet farther and to do it together. And a simple way for his profession is he can hand over the money to give it some capital energy. And so what I love about Michael is he leads with the how can I help you part, and there's no bounds. There's just no bounds to it. And I'm sure at some point he'll be like, this is outside of my capability, or I don't have time for this or such. But I found his openness to do anything for founders and to sort of walk closer to whatever it is important to you, like to walk into your arena, and rather than have you walk into his arena and like present it to him, to just be something to mimic. I remember him coming to visit the Wagon office. He came up our little dinky stairs, and he just went around the room and hugged every single person in the room. And I don't remember giving him like a signal to do that, and I can't imagine in all circumstances that is how he enters a room. But he did pick up that was a potentially nice thing to do, and everyone was like, "Wow, who was that?" I was like, that was the person who wrote half of our very large seed round. And they're like, "Whoa, like that seemed like a really regular, lovely human." I'm like, "Yeah, that's Michael," and that was just quite early into my experience with him, and then through the classes and the community he's built, both in terms of the Slack channel of people who've taken the work and fellow founders, but also his work in terms of immigration rights and his Project Ellis work that you can ask him about. He is just someone who I look up to for having a strong opinion about what should be in the world, and then bringing a group of people together to make it extra great, not just good enough. I recall taking one of the early versions of the class of the general management, the Harrison general management class. I don't know, it was like the second or third iteration of it. It was when it was still down in Palo Alto, and it was on a Saturday, and I could have got myself down there. I don't have a car, but you can get down there. I'm not even sure Uber was out yet, but take the Caltrain, you figure it out. And he sent big black cars, big fancy cars to pick us up in the city and drive us down to the peninsula to take this class. And I was like, whoa, like, who is this person? Like, and his answer was very straightforward. You have exchanged so much of your time and energy to spend with me to help me make my thing great. Like, of course, we're going to have that is how I respect your time. And, let's also do it like in a little bit of style because we're going to have a great day today. And every interaction I've with Adam has had that tinge of his bar for what is good is so clear and so high, but he never holds it over your head in some egotistical way. He makes you feel incredibly included, but the expectations are very, very, very high. I just try to come up with my own ways to kind of mimic anything that I can feel natural to me that would have that kind of impact.
Well, now you've got me very excited for my interview with Michael.
I feel like it's like going on before. It's like opening for a very famous comedian or rock star or something. Like, next, like, if you really like the opener, stick around for Aerosmith or whatever.
All right, last question. I'm in Baltimore, Maryland.
Yep.
Where should I go eat?
I think for seafood, I am very partial to LP steamers. So like, think brown newspaper kind of style on the tables, big mallets, steamed crabs, Old Bay, Natty Bows, Old Bay shrimp, whole thing, phenomenal. My buddy has a chicken restaurant called Poulet. Go see him. That's great. Have to put in a shout out there. And then honestly, the best possible thing to do in Baltimore on a Friday night is to go to Illusions, which is the magic bar run by Spencer Horseman, who is a very accomplished illusionist. Like, think David Copperfield, but wilder. And on Friday nights, you can see him perform at this magic themed bar that he runs. He was a high school mate of mine, and it is world class. It will shake you to your core. It is just wonderful. And so LP Steamers and then Illusions, they're on the same side of town. That's a pretty good night.
This is really great, Jeff. For those who want to follow you, follow your work, get in contact with you, where should they go?
So I tell people I do these roughly once a month-ish. I do these like Twitter helpathons. I used to do them when I had a lot more time on my hands. Stripe is quite engaging for my full work-life balance, whatever that could mean. And but I still find time to just like write on the internet, hey, like, does anyone need any help with anything? And I get a lot of responses. I'm probably getting like 30 to 50 responses on this now, either through DMs or email. My email address is obviously all over the internet. Like, if finding my email address is the blocker to your success, then you have another problem. And so I am extremely available on the internet. I respond to all my emails, pretty much all my emails, even if the answer is I don't have time to help you. But I really love the serendipity that you can generate by putting yourself out there. And I know that we don't always live in a society in which all people feel comfortable putting themselves out there for all kinds of reasons. And that is truly terrible. We should be tackling those problems very directly. But I hope that you can find a community that's a little bit wider than your regular circle, by which you can put yourself out there and just see what people are up to. And so please feel free to email me any single thing. I will definitely read it.
Jeff Weinstein, thank you for your time.
Yeah, this was fun.
What a marvelous episode that was, and what an amazing human being Jeff is. Believe it or not, that was actually his first podcast episode ever, and you would never have guessed based on how well he did. If you enjoyed that episode as much as I did, you can rate and subscribe to Business Logic on Apple Podcasts or whatever app you happen to be using. You can also follow us on Twitter. We are at Business Logic FM. Lastly, I hope you're super hyped for the next conversation with Michael Deering, founder of Harrison Metal. You could tell that Jeff was very excited about him, and so am I. So I can't wait to talk to you then. See you in the next one. Cheers.